हाम्रो सेसन सुरु गर्न गइरहेको छौँ। आज हामी इन्टरनेसनल कन्फरेन्स अन फेडरलिजम, डिभोल्युसन अफ पावर एन्ड इन्क्लुजिभ डेमोक्रेसी भन्ने विषयमा विभिन्न कार्यपत्र प्रस्तुत गर्ने मित्रहरूले गरिसक्नु भएको छ। हिजोदेखि सुरु भएको, अब हामी दोस्रो दिनको अन्तिम सेसनतिर छौँ र यही क्रममा जुन अवसर दिनुभएकोमा काठमाडौँ युनिभर्सिटीलाई धन्यवाद दिँदै हाम्रो कार्यक्रममा अगाडि बढाउन चाहन्छु। र हाम्रो सेड्युल अनुसार कार्यपत्रको पहिलो प्रस्तोता हुनुहुन्छ आलोक प्रसन्न कुमारजी। उहाँलाई चाहिँ आफ्नो को फाउन्डर एन्ड टिम लिडर, विधि सेन्टर फर लिगल पोलिसी, बेङ्गलोर, कर्नाटक, इन्डिया। उहाँले चाहिँ आफ्नो पेपर प्रस्तुत गर्नको लागि म हार्दिक अनुरोध गर्दछु। धन्यवाद।
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Alok Prasanna Kumar, and I am very honored and humbled to be part of this conference. Having listened to almost 2 days worth of sessions, I'm very grateful to Dr. Bipin for having invited me here, because I believe I've taken away a lot of knowledge and understanding about not just Nepal, but some of the common issues concerning federalism, fiscal transfer of resources. And in my paper, I'm sure you'd have had a copy of it before you. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. I will cover some of the main points, something which I believe will follow on from some of the previous papers which have been presented and some of the points which have been made earlier. I will of course be fleshing this out with a lot more data and a lot more particular points. But what I wanted to cover specifically today relates to the Finance Commission of India. Now, this is a body which has been set up under the Constitution of India. I think we've had a couple of references to it in the past, and I will discuss this in a little bit more detail. This is a body which has been replicated at the state level in India through something called the State Finance Commissions. They do something very similar to the Finance Commission of India, but as I will mention, they have not been very successful at it. Finally, I want to leave you all and with a set of thoughts on what it might take to make for a credible institution which is in charge of fiscal transfers. I know I've used the word success in a couple of places, but I think the goal that an institution which is in charge of fiscal transfers, the goal should be to create credibility. People will agree and disagree as to how much money should come here, go there, and so on. But as long as the recommendations of the Finance Commission have credibility, it will contribute immensely to federalism in Nepal. So, context of the Fiscal Commission is what I'm talking about. So, let me very briefly give you an introduction to the Finance Commission of India. Now, this was an innovative body which was set up only post-independence in 1951. This was not something which was there in the Government of India Act. And just to give you a little bit of history, which has also been mentioned in a couple of places, there was a proto-federalism under the Government of India Act, and even before under 1919. So, provincial governments then, as they were during British rule, had some experience of making laws, preparing budgets, of enabling their local government, but in a very limited circumstance. So they had some idea, and this was improved in 1935, and by the time independence came about, people understood that provincial governments and then they became state governments are different from the central government. But the key issue was money. How will the money flow from taxes, from various sources of revenue, from the center to the states? And this is where I think we have to accept and understand there is no perfect way of doing this. There is no federalism in the world where all the powers and taxes are devolved very neatly and very clearly between provincial and central levels. There are always going to be disagreements, there are always going to be conflicts, there are always going to be differing views on how to devolve resources. It is about the process. What is it that makes the process credible, that will get most people to accept it, and will be repeatable and sustainable in some way? So the Finance Commission of India is not a permanent body. It is not something which was set up in 1951 and continues in the same shape today till 2023. A finance commission is set up for a limited period of time. It has 5 members. There is a chair of the commission who is usually some sort of retired bureaucrat or somebody who's an expert in public finance, somebody who's an expert in government spending and so on. And there are 4 members who are a combination of the same experts, and there's a technocratic body. It's what I think one of the papers which was mentioned earlier, it is one of those 4th institutions, right? Which is one of those 4th structure institutions which give meaning to the constitutional promise of federalism. And at the national level, the government sets up a finance commission, gives them a specific set of terms of reference, and says, please give us your report and recommendations. One of the very interesting things is that nowhere in the Constitution of India does it say that the recommendations of the Finance Commission will be binding. All right? The report that is submitted with the recommendations, it is submitted to the President. President tells the government to place it before the Parliament. Parliament says, yes, we accept these recommendations. And by and large, especially with regard to the transfer of funds, the recommendations of the Finance Commission have been accepted. There are some policy issues, some policy aspects where government says we will try or maybe we won't at this moment. But the Finance Commission's recommendations are treated with the highest level of respect, irrespective of party in power, irrespective of the majority they hold, and irrespective of the particular economic situation in the country. So the Finance Commission is given a limited period of time. In that period of time, they go around the country. One of the things that the Finance Commission Act provides for is the power to get information, summon people, ask them to provide information, but they don't really have to because everybody is more than willing to give information to the Finance Commission. To go a little bit into a personal thing, when I was in Delhi with the Vidhi Center for Legal Policy, we have contributed some of our research to the Finance Commission, and you will find some of the Finance Commission reports cite our work and cite our assistance in helping with the reports, but my views are purely my views for the purposes of this particular paper. So they follow this process. They reach out to the chief ministers, they reach out to finance ministers, they reach out to finance secretaries, they speak to experts, they take on board research reports, they commission some research reports, and they come out with this report. This report is available freely for anyone who wants to read it on their website. I think going back several finance commissions, reports are available, and you can see why they have said this is how much money should go. Because the 2 most important things that any finance commission does is what is called horizontal devolution and vertical devolution. Vertical devolution divides the money between the union and the states, right? So if there is 100 rupees, how much will the union get? How much will all the states get? As per the latest Finance Commission report, of that 100 rupees, 59 rupees is with the union government, 41 rupees is with the state governments. This is an increase, slow, steady increase over the years and the decades. It was earlier in the 20%, then it became the 30%. Last 2 finance commissions have given 42 and 41%, right? So that's their first task. The second task is horizontal devolution, which is dividing up that 41 rupees that I referred to between all of India's states. And this is where the work gets a little challenging. And this is where I think the Finance Commission has done a good job in laying out the criteria very well. This was also what prompted the question which I asked a couple of sessions ago is, you want equalization, you want equity, but how are you measuring this? And what the Finance Commission of India does is it has about 7 criteria. These criteria change from Finance Commission to Finance Commission. So the 16th Finance Commission, which is in the process of being set up, will frame its criteria on the basis of the terms of reference. But by far, and almost since the beginning, the single most important criteria has been something called income distance. So what they do is that they rank every Indian state from richest to poorest on the basis of per capita GDP, right? So as per the per capita GDP, I think for the 15th Finance Commission, Haryana was the richest state and Jharkhand or Bihar was the poorest state. So they adopt a formula where more money goes to the poorest state, right? So they ensure that poorer states get a higher score in the ranking that they have created and ensure that that goes there. Then they take population into account. Population, as per the last Finance Commission report, accounts for about 25%. This is based on the 71 census and the 2011 census. And then they take into account area of the state. They take into account the state's effort to collect more taxes. They take into account the forest cover, because they want states to promote sustainable development. They take forest cover. All of this, they clearly outline. There is a clear marking given. There's a clear methodology. If any of you is an economist with that training, you can replicate the formula that they have given with the data that they have and reproduce the same results. So what has happened is that even today, if somebody disagrees, right, somebody disagrees with what the Finance Commission is saying, they can only say, please use different criteria. No one says we don't understand why. We don't understand why we've been given less money and more money. And as we discussed in the previous session, the richer states are always upset that we give so much in tax revenue, why don't we get back so much more? But that's a different issue. It still meets the criteria of equity. Now, given the Finance Commission has worked generally well, there was an effort to replicate them at the state level. So the Constitution of India provides for municipal self-government and what we call Panchayati Raj institutions, which are rural self-government bodies. Like the Finance Commission of India, the state finance commissions are supposed to take into account the need to provide money for rural and urban local self-government and divide the money between the state and these two. Now, of course, India has 28 and now there are 30, now 29, and we have multiple states. So not all states have done the same effective job. I have cited the work of my namesake, Mr. V.N. Alok, who has done very detailed study on how state financial commissions have worked. So for a moment, when I think when Mr. Adhikari sent me an email, I had a slight doubt, did he get the right Alok? Because Mr. V.N. Alok is the one who has done the most detailed study on this topic. I have provided his works in the references. Please do have a look at it. He points out that only a couple of states have done a very good job in setting up finance commissions, ensuring that they function efficiently, ensuring that their recommendations are taken seriously, and that money actually goes to the local self-government. So we find that there are 4 or 5 problems he identifies why the state finance commissions, right? This is different from the Union Finance Commission, this is the state finance commissions. He identifies a few common factors why they haven't worked. Number one, key problem is the lack of good fiscal data. Not all states have a very robust mechanism for collecting and maintaining statistics about the economic development in their states, and a lot of times the Finance Commission is hampered by it. The second is they don't follow a consistent methodology. The problem has been that some states have just said, let's appoint a retired judge. Now, those of you who are from the legal profession will know retired judges are good for a lot of things. Economic planning and management is not one of them. So with no disrespect to any retired judge here, let me just say it in as subtle a manner as possible. Then there is, of course, the fact that states are not able to find the right kind of experts, even when they want to. Even when they want to find good qualified people to, help with the process, they find a difficulty in doing so. Finally, because of all of these, they themselves don't respond in a way which inspires confidence to state finance commissions that their recommendations will be taken seriously. And the other difficulty is that after the Finance Commission gives its recommendations, state finance commissions don't necessarily look at what they're saying and follow accordingly, right? So their terms are slightly different. There is no coordination. So we have seen, and I've given some of the numbers in my paper, we have seen that there has been very uneven performance of the state finance commissions. That said, India does suffer from this problem of huge economic disparity between not just state and state, but within a state, you have extremely rich, extremely well-off districts, which are mostly large cities, and extremely poor districts, which are rural, tribal kind of areas. And this is a challenge that both the Finance Commission and the State Finance Commission have to grapple with. And perhaps one way of doing so is maybe being more creative in their use of data. In the sense that currently Finance Commission still relies on data provided to them by the government, which is annually generated, of course, but GDP is an estimate at the end of the day. It doesn't capture every last transaction. It doesn't capture every last detail about all of this. Census data comes once every 10 years, and in India, we haven't had a census in the last 13 years. God knows when we'll have the next one. I was told that there was some controversy over the Sindh census in Pakistan. So it's something which sources of data are not always reliable. But what we sort of need to push finance commissions towards is to use high frequency data points which are available. Now, in India, we introduced the GST system. There has been, of course, some criticism, and I have been one of those who have criticized it. But one thing that it has provided is a large volume of data on transactions which are taking place in the country. You are required to log everything online. People sort of keep track of everything. And, there is data to show where economic activity is taking place. We also have data from mobile phone towers. Now that mobile phone penetration has increased greatly, we know where people are. Because one of the challenges, and I'm sure Nepal also deals with this problem, which is we're not accounting for intra-country migration. We don't know where do people move from one point to the other. The census cannot capture it because it's a time slice. It's only once in 10 years we know this is where people were when the census was conducted. But if you want real-time understanding of where are people living and working, perhaps we need to look for a different source of data on this point. Now, I accept some of this, what I have said, are public databases. You can easily access them. Shouldn't be a difficulty in getting hold of them. But some of these are private databases. It's not possible to easily get your hands on mobile phone data and so on. So this is where the Finance Commission perhaps needs to be given more powers to access these kinds of data. But here's the flip side to using this data. It has to be made transparent. Everybody should be able to see, to know what data it is that you're using, what are the calculations that you're making, and if I were to do these calculations following the formula that you have used, I will get the same results as you have. So this transparency is what gives people the confidence that this is what you are doing, and this is why I think you're doing it right. And I may disagree. I may disagree to X percentage here and there, but I think what you're doing is not fundamentally wrong in some senses. So just to leave with a few takeaways, I do believe the challenges that Nepal is dealing with federalism, every federal country in the history of the world has faced these challenges. These are not unique, so to speak. This is something which is part and parcel of the process. There will be disagreements, there will be conflicts over it, and each country has found a different way out of the problem. I don't know if any of you have seen the fantastic musical called Hamilton. Anybody? And one of the big things when the US government was formed was how is money going to flow into our country and out of our country, and how is money going to be distributed. The public debt was such a big issue then. So again, between center and state. So this is something which every federalism has dealt with. And I believe creating these fourth branch institutions, which was mentioned earlier, making them robust, making sure that they are credible institutions. I'd like to highlight that word a little bit. Making sure that they're credible institutions is what makes the difference between making for a very successful, robust federalism or collapsing into some sort of anarchy overall. So thank you for your time. I hope I have kept to the timeline, and I hope to hear from your feedback on the paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Alok ji. Our next presenter is Sadikshya Dulal ji. Please present your paper. It is 15 minutes for you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to start my presentation with the concluding remarks made by Dr. Shivakumar Giri earlier this morning. Federalism, as generally understood around the world, entails independently powerful provincial or state governments. Strong local governments are not unique to a federal system, as evinced by, for example, strong local governments in unitary United Kingdom. By contrast, strong and independent regional or provincial governments are a distinguishing feature of federalism. For example, Australia, Germany, and the United States all have strong and independent state governments that have important exclusive responsibilities in health, education, and infrastructure, and they have access to substantial revenue sources, including taxes, duties, and resource royalties. Alok just mentioned about how federalism came about in the United States of America during his concluding remark. As I will be presenting, federations differ in the sense of the factors that lead to a state becoming a federal state and not a unitary state. So the 2015 Constitution establishes the 7 provinces as relatively weak. Intermediate subunits is what I'm arguing today. Sure, there are signs of progress as stressed by Honorable Dr. Kimlal Devkota this morning. Nepal is still in the process of giving shape to its federal structure. However, in my paper, I have attempted to identify some of the factors that may help explain the current status of the provincial governments. So it appears that the provinces have little structural power, as seen in the relative lack of revenue and revenue sources provided to the subnational governments, especially provincial government, dependence on national level party organizations and coalitions. In the previous general elections in November 2022, the politicians that vying for election into the provincial governments were, for the most part, selected by the central committees of the national parties, whereby the national party leaders clearly retain their power over such province-level appointments. In other federal systems, such as the United States, Australia, Germany, and India, province or state-level governments tend not to be so politically dependent on the national-level party. In Australia, in fact, state-level party organizations are independent from national-level party organizations, even when they come from the same broad political affiliations. The other reason that seems to make the provinces appear weaker is a little institutional power. Despite several formal mechanisms and legal arrangements, the fiscal arrangements that distribute resources within the federalism are heavily defined by informal mechanisms giving institutional continuity to old practices. The reason behind this institutional continuation are institutional path dependency, which I will be talking about shortly, political interests, entrenched power and influence of federal institutions, and incentives of bureaucrats, explained in detail again in the later slides, that are still tied to the older system, the old unitary system. Further, the discourse around provinces being costly and hence unnecessary further weakens the legitimacy of the provinces. Politicians are often questioning or rejecting federalism on public platforms. This is something we've been seeing quite frequently. All of this leads to the further weakening of the social legitimacy of these entities that are already new in architecture and implementation. So, why are the provinces weak? In answering this question, let us look at the evolution of federalism in Nepal. What I will be saying next might not be new to most of you, but what I am trying to do here is use the framework of historical institutionalism to analyze the evolution of federalism in Nepal so as to explain the current weaknesses of the provinces. Historical institutionalism emphasizes that early events causally influence later developments. Formative steps towards federalism, therefore, shape the evolution of succeeding federal trajectories, as we will be seeing. So, I use the critical juncture approach of historical institutionalism in my analysis. Now, critical juncture is an event prior to which a range of possibilities exist, but after which these possibilities will have mostly vanished. Now, in November 2005, the Maoists and the parliamentary parties, a 7-party alliance, reached a deal to restore democracy. In the following year, the opposition to the introduction of the direct rule of the monarch, former King Gyanendra, strengthened in the form of protests led by the political parties and Maoists. The protests culminated in the Second People's Movement, which ultimately led the king to concede on April 24, 2006. Now this, I argue, marked the initiation of the critical juncture. On 21st November 2006, the Maoists and the democratic government signed the Comprehensive Peace Agreement, with one of the agreements being progressive restructuring of the state by ending the then centralized and unitary form of the state. The peace agreement in 2006 committed to the idea of state transformation. However, it made no mention of federalism. So another critical element of the historical institutionalism approach is the importance given to contingencies. So in 2007, a contingent event substantially changed the contextual conditions and thus the prospects for state restructuring. This was the 3-week protest in the Tarai. I recognize this as contingency, a key element of critical juncture, because the uprising in the Madhesh required political guarantees that territorial autonomy would be a part of the new constitutional framework. This led to the first amendment to Nepal's 2007 interim constitution that the country would be federal. So now that the decision was made that the nation would be federal, I argue this marks the closure of the critical juncture. Although contingency and critical juncture provide explanation to why a federal solution may have eventually surfaced as a likely, yet not necessary outcome during the critical juncture, historical context still shapes the repertoire of available alternative in significant ways. It is therefore important to identify critical antecedents. I identify 2 critical antecedents, which are basically factors preceding a critical juncture that combine in a causal sequence with factors during a critical juncture to produce divergent long-term outcomes. The first of these 2 critical antecedents being the political demands of the marginalized groups, and second, the pre-existing decentralization policies and practices, the institutional infrastructure in the government structure of Nepal. Let me take you back to 1990s. So following the political liberalization brought about by the 1990 constitution, political activists representing the indigenous nationalities started making demands based on self-determination and autonomy arrangements. In early 1996, the CP and Maoists started an armed struggle vowing to fight for the poor and the oppressed by ending the dominance of high caste Hindus from the hills and emancipating those who had been politically excluded and socially marginalized since the territorial unification of the country. Now, in early 2000s, the Maoist insurgency stepped up its action in the Tarai, leading to the Madhesis making more forceful claims about federalism. So I would like to gather your attention towards how this set up the climate for federalism to come about in the later stage. Thus, between the period between 1990s to 2000, now it was not just the Madhesi parties or the Maoists, but there was some overlap between the discourse and demands of activists representing indigenous nationalities, Maoists, and other political parties where all these, and Madhesi political parties, where all 3 sought fundamental changes to the Nepali state in a way that would end the dominance of high caste Hindus from the hills. Now, the second pre-existing critical antecedent is the decentralized structure, which some commentators on reforms describe as forming the basis for decentralization. Under the partyless panchayat system, the local administrative act was divided Nepal into 14 zones, 75 districts, with each district further divided into villages and town panchayats. This forms a basis of the present system as seen in the local governments. So thus the infrastructural capacities of the constituent units can give a plausible explanation as to why a federal actors entrepreneurial agents imagine the viability of a federal state and not a unitary state with local governments that are autonomous. So, other than that, power dynamics is another element which can help us understand the federal trajectories that we've seen in our country so far. In the Constituent Assembly, in the first Constituent Assembly, the party that publicly supported federalism, Maoists and the Madhesi parties, emerged as the victorious parties. But as they went on to the second election for CA, the Constituent Assembly that took place in 2013, contrary to the results of the first CA Assembly, the Maoists finished a distant third place, with Nepali Congress and CPN-UML gaining the highest number of votes. Now, these two leading political parties have been associated with the development logic and not the self-deterministic logic. Development as the institutional logic behind decentralization became contested when the Madhesi parties brought forth the idea of self-determination. Now, the co-supporters of the federal model, like I said earlier, the Madhesis and the Maoists saw a decline after the second CA Assembly, and the parties, National Congress and CPN-UML, who were not enthusiastic about federal structures, saw federalism, could have seen federalism as a means to further development. Federalism, as currently seen, I believe, is in a state of limbo, and currently the dominant political parties appear to be satisfied with such a state, given their lukewarm view on federalism, coupled with their hesitation to reject federalism for fear of electoral backslash in the provinces. And as federal elections have already occurred and federal governments have already been set up, the dominant political parties seem content to make use of this ostensibly federal structure to further their development agenda. I'd like to conclude by saying that the contesting ideas of self-determination versus development, it looks like the political parties supporting the development logics are in power, as a result of which there does not seem to be enough incentives or interest in the part of the political parties to strengthen provinces that actually are the new creation of the federal system in Nepal. With that, I'd like to end my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sadikshya ji. Our next presentation is Mohan Manandhar ji. Thank you. MIT Policy Analyst.
Good afternoon. I hope we have already woken up by Sadiksha's presentation. Quite interesting and quite partly theoretical too. So my presentation is sort of builds on her rationales and her reasons. I am only arguing that federalism, if needs to be successful, then the first thing we need to have is federalism in the political party. And that's the argument that I am bringing in here. Again, before I go into my paper, I'd like to thank the organizers to give me this opportunity, and I would like to sort of thank the participants who are now really woken up. So thank you. The idea of this analysis is based on the multi-party democratic structure. So it's not the structure that we are in Nepal. That's where I have analyzed. Many of us here, yesterday and today, has really lamented that we have there are a lot of difficulties in federalism, there are issues related to fiscal federalism, etc. But if you look at democratization of the whole state, including restructuring of state, as well as looking at how we deal with political party in a democratic state, it is one big achievement that we have a constitution which defines this state as federal state. So that's good. The second one, quite interestingly, we have seen in last 7 years is that we have had a quite important and successful election in this federal model. We had a local election, we had a provincial election, we had a federal election too. So successfully done. People really were interested, at least in 2017, pretty much excited and interested in voting. This also we have seen in 2022 and 23 elections. So this is good for us as a state which focuses on multi-party democracy and thinks that citizens are the main, have a sovereign right where their choice of political parties to run the state is accepted. However, before I go into federalism and why it's not, there is some problem, is that we need to understand that the court or a judicial system is still unitary. Armed security forces are still unitary. Some of the fourth branches, the commissions that been presented yesterday, still operates on a unitary structure, including election commission. We also know that bureaucracy's interest and incentives lies in a more central aspect because that's where they came from. So there are issues related to this. This is unitary system. Whereas two distinct branches of state, executive branch and legislative branch, is federal. And these two branches are the leaders or the guiding people are from the elected political party leaders. So we need to understand that if they want to really federalize this, if they wanted to make sure that fiscal federalism also is implemented, fully implemented, then they, inside their party, they need it to be federal. Federalized, let's say. It's not yet federalized fully. The Political Party Act does provide that sort of a provision or condition for political party to go ahead with General Assembly and have a federal structure in it, but it does not describe a lot in terms of roles, mandates, and their sort of responsibilities in terms of a federal structure. So party can decide what they want to do. They can also only have a one focal point looking at the federal level, political party levels. So that's where there is some sort of a weakening part in terms of a legal framework. What I have looked at is that fit for really implementing federalism, which also yesterday and today has came about in presentation, at least for Nepal, is that they have suggested or even sort of a claim that it's political party who has not pushed this agenda forward. So let's take that as it is, and let's accept that one of the most important actor to make federalism happen is a political party. Are they, and I have looked at from a political economy analysis part, so I have looked at only from, of course, interest and incentive defines, but I'm only looking at on a part of incentives. Does this incentives drive a political party to federalize themselves? If you look at one incentive, so therefore I am bringing the reason, is that there is a coalition government. The coalition is part of the multi-party democracy, of course, but the Nepali coalition is a little bit different than what probably is there. However, this coalition does have an impact on how central leadership has an authority over the decision making in terms of electoral processes. We need to understand, I mean, if we look back the historical facts, that in only two instances that we, after 1990, sort of a party democracy. We have only two instances where majority party rules, right? In 1992 to 94, where Congress party was as a majority government ruled, but in 2017 to 2019, the National Nepal Communist Party ruled as a majority party. But within 2.5 years, there was a struggle or a fights in the political party. You know. So therefore, this whole idea of majority rule was gone. In 1994, there was a mid-election. In 2021, there was a broken, the National Communist Party was broken, therefore the Maoist came out and the whole majority idea of multi-party system was gone. So therefore the coalition has happened from 1994 until today. It's not only on the party system, meaning the election for multi-party system in terms of 1990s onwards until 2000 or 2017 to 23. It also appears that, or also had some implication from a sort of an electoral process, basically a proportionate electoral process, which then through any way the parties who gets the highest vote does not become the majority party. We have seen that in Constitution Assembly 1, we have seen that in Constitution Assembly 2. In both cases also, the political parties came together and form a government, which is coalition government. Quite interestingly. If you look at the coalition or even carteling parties' nature in Europe, we can see, or India, we can see that there is a distinct sort of a behavior or dimension that is based on political agenda. The coalition groups either contested between themselves do have one or two political agenda on the basis of which they create coalitions. You look at India, pretty clear. No? Understandably, the parties were run by old legacy families, but still there is a political agenda to contest at the citizen level. Whereas we have seen in Nepal that that is not true. We have had a coalition not on the basis of a political agenda. Initially it was, in 1990s initial periods. But as we moved on, this agenda was, especially in Constitution Assembly, it was clearly well that we've seen far left to far right together coming to form a government. In the name of stability, we have continued with these coalition governments for a quite long time without a political agenda. So that's one bit. So this argument about coalition does have an implication of providing less autonomy to provincial or local level political party branches or organizations, because that during the coalition, we know that the selection of candidates and selection of ministers or privileged posts were negotiated between 5-party or 4-party or etc. We know that some of the most popular leaders were not even given a candidacy during this election. So there is a distinct ways of negotiating, and the negotiation does not take place at the local level or a provincial level. It took place at the federal or central level. Therefore, only 4 party chiefs came together to decide on candidacy does have an implication of how autonomous or independent the political party levels or organizational wings at the provincial or local level happens. And it's very clear. I mean, we have had contestation, etc. But still, the central leadership, especially those 6 to 7 political party leaders comes in, decides on the candidates for the election and candidates for the privileged posts, ministerial post or other post in the state. So there's a distinct problem in terms of a unitary system. And that has 2 distinct incentive or informal institutions that comes into play. One is about Bhagbanda. What does this mean? I'll come back to that. The second is about patronage. If you look at incentives in political economy sense, we we do have monarchy started providing this incentive on the basis of the idea of benevolence, right? So this is you go back to the theoretical aspect, you can see that this is where the benevolence is where the whole incentive of political parties is linked to. Monarchists did have patronized people. They did provide protection for their own followers, specific groups, in terms of providing them either financial incentives, either other economic incentives, or even political incentives or protection. In the same time, our political party, because they were also struggling and fighting with the monarchy from last around 100 years, they also needed to protect their followers. Because at that point where the absolute monarchy was there, the followers did had a risk of even lives. Their property was captured, or even they were sort of they were sacked from their positions or post or employment, etc. So they needed that protection from the political party, including the financial support for them to continue the struggle. And that's where this patronage is pretty strong inside the political party. And you ask anybody, we know that if you do not please your boss, the top boss, meaning the political party president or a chairperson, you are not going to have anything from this political party position or even the participation in the main decision making, even if you are a member of a central sort of a committee. So therefore, the whole idea of that patronage, because I work with political party, I understand that this patronage continued. I mean, even then when we had a democratic structure, when the Maoist sort of a arm movement has pushed the Congress leaders from villages, they needed to come back and had a protection. And Deva did protected them, clearly. At this point of time, you look at Deva and say, why this leader is there still? No? Why, like in other countries, why he is not been sort of a sideline? It's because that they were protected for a long time. When it was needed, he protected. So this protectionism is quite strong in our social values also, religious, as well as this informal institution continues with it. So with coalition decision making supported by informal institution of protection, then they become pretty much unitary or centralized aspect. The second aspect is about Pagbanda. And we have heard these words many times in the newspaper. This idea of Pagbanda was in a political space after 1990. Initially, it was in the Communist Party, where these factions of Communist Party who came together wanted to have their own position in terms of proportionate their followers in the main party system. And this Pagbanda continues. It was a smaller sort of an inner insight story only, but this came about in a larger bit when the Constitution Assembly happened. As she suggested earlier, the one who sort of took the transformation agenda, the Maoist and Madhesis lost their sort of a majority or people's votes. They didn't have a choice. They needed to continue becoming part of the decision-making process. And because they became very small, and also because no party has majority in Constitutional Assembly too, Maoist became a decisive force in creating this coalition. And if you are a weaker party, which is happening now also, after 2023 election, still the negotiation is not on the basis of philosophy or a political agenda. Negotiation is based on resource sharing. So this whole idea of coalition of power sharing became more like a benefit sharing. And this Pagbanda took place much more larger way, not only on a political space, but on the government, on the other civil society lives, included us. And what is Pagbanda? Pagbanda is a very simple word that has come about from a legal frame of Angsabandha, which is basically is the division of ancestral property. And this Prasanna Moni, where is my Bipin sir? So he said that there is a parsimonial division among ancestor things among same family members. So this is where the ansabandha is, and this is formally defined in the civil code, and this is in normal language we call it bhagbandha. So basically if you look at it and say, where is the ancestor property? It's basically state resources, right? Is it ancestor? Yes, partly two parts is ancestor. One, that those who had fought for multi-party democracy or republic, they actually put their lives in stake. Their property was lost. Their everything was taken by the state then. So they think after 2007-15 constitution, the leaders, those who had lost everything during this struggle or movement, they think that they needed to have a benefit from the state, which we think is also true. Okay, I mean, this is quite fascinating. We think that, okay, they should have some benefit because they have had lot of struggle, they have done, put their own families in risk of lives, and their properties was gone. So at this point of time, they needed to have that benefit. So this whole idea of ancestral property is about this idea of sacrifice, that where you bring your benefit, that because you have sacrificed, now you need to take benefit from the state property or a state resources. And this Bhagbandha is quite interesting in a space where we are talking about democracy, we're talking about sort of a transparency, we're talking about accountability. How come we are not accountable to people? And I understand this is also true with cartel parties in Europe, where their link to citizens are gone. Their issue regarding social justice is already proved. Their issues regarding economic reforms are gone. The only thing they can talk about is either reduce the taxes or improve these services. And this is also difficult. How long you can continue with this agenda? This is also true with us, but unlike their cartel party, our sort of a power sharing is framed on ancestral property division, and quite interestingly. So that's one. And of course, this, no problem. I'm completing. So the ancestor property, the Bhagbandha idea of having these benefits distribution is quite making sure that this is continued in the process of how appointments happen, how ministerial posts were given, and that is decided by coalition central leadership. How do you expect with that incentive that the central leadership will devolve their power to provincial and local government? And that's the question that we are suggesting, that undermines the implementation of federalism. Thank you.
थ्याङ्क यू मानन्दरजीलाई धेरै धेरै धन्यवाद। उहाँले एकदम ग्राउन्ड रियालिटीमा बसेर विश्लेषण गर्नुभएको थियो। सुन्ने इच्छा हुँदाहुँदै पनि समयको पाबन्दीले गर्दा हामीले छोट्याउनु पर्ने भयो। यसपछि हाम्रो प्रस्तोता हुनुहुन्छ प्रोफेसर लाल बाबुजीलाई आफ्नो कमेन्ट प्रस्तुत गरिदिनु हुनको लागि हार्दिक अनुरोध गर्दछु।
Respected chairperson, आदरणीय दिदी बहिनी तथा दाजुभाइहरू, at the outset, I would like to congratulate the organizer for the organizing of the burning issue, not only important, the burning issue about the federalism, because the federalism is the one of the whatever, the debatable or problematic, whatever you can say me, problematic or debating issue nowadays. And the political party inclusion and the coalition government is always nowadays in the doldrum paradox. The presenter already expressed about that. So as a commentator, first of all, the responsibility of the commentator is the comment on the paper who has written the Sadikshya ji, Alok ji, and Manandhar ji. So my first responsibility, the comment on this paper, whatever the pro and cons of the paper. But before coming in this dash, our respected chairperson has told me, because more than 90% of participants in Nepali, and those who has come from the abroad, who has already facilitated by the organizer to understand in the, our language. So it is better for you, you have to express your views in Nepali. So please allow me for that. सबभन्दा पहिला त के हो भने हाम्रो सदिक्षाजीले पेपर प्रेजेन्ट गर्नुभयो फेडरलिजमको र उहाँले ओरिजिन अफ द फेडरलिजम इन नेपाल आई एम टोटली एग्री विथ यू तर लेट मी क्लियर वन थिङ वी आर अलवेज टकिङ अबाउट द युनाइटेड स्टेट अमेरिका इज द फाउन्डर अफ द फेडरलिजम or a mother of the federalism. But I have read some of the books. Nepal is the founder or mother of the federalism. There is a very least research about the Mahipal dynasty and Gopal dynasty. And during the Kirat period, there was a federation conducted in the Nepal. And at that time, the allocation of the federalism, तीनटा चाहिँ गरेको थियो. And the call of the federalism is Thum. तीनटा चाहिँ federal allocate गरेको थियो. And these allocate of federalism on the basis of the geography, not on the ethnicity or anything. However, the name of the dynasty is Kirat. So, our culture is the origin of the culture is peace of culture, harmony of culture, prosperity of the culture, and obedience of the culture. It's my view. So I would like to say the origin of the federalism, not in the United States of America or any other thing, it is the origin of the Nepal. The other things, you have written the origin of the federalism since 2008. I think Vedanand Jha was the Nepal Tarai Congress. You are right. But after that, in the present context, you have already mentioned that the Madhesi movement, the constitution mentioned the federalism and proportion of the representation in the constitution after the movement of Madhesi movement. And the amendment of the first amendment of the Constitution. But I was also teacher of the university, and I got many opportunity to present the paper from Mechi to Mahakali, from hill, mountain, and Tarai. And at that time, when I was presented the paper in the Madhesh area, they called me, they used me. You are the stainless steel spoon of hill community. Even in the Nuakot Sindhu Palchak so and so, and they told me you are the tools of the elite class and quoted me Baun and Chetri. And I always told him, I am Nepali. I am always emphasis and views in Nepal and Nepal. In the म चाहिँ कहाँ एउटा पेपर प्रेजेन्ट गरेका थिएँ मैले के भने एक जातीय फेडरलिजम प्योर पोइजन हो भने बहुजातीय फेडरलिजम चाहिँ पानी मिलाएको पोइजन हो भने 5 मिनट्स मात्रै अब त्यसपछि उहाँहरूले मलाई के भन्नुभयो भने आज त फिजिकल अट्याक हुन्छन् भनेर मैले भने मेरो काम कलम चलाउने हो खुकुरी चलाउने हो हैन तर एउटा कुरा म सरहरुलाई भन्छु पार्टिसिपेन्टलाई पृथ्वीनारायण शाह गोर्खाको राजा थिए नेपालको एकीकरण फादर अफ द युनिफिकेसन भन्छन् कसैले के भन्छन् के हो तर मेरो विचारमा फादर अफ द युनिफिकेसन नै हो उहाँ चाहिँ गोर्खाका राजा थिए गोर्खाका चाहिँ के रे जब नेपाल चाहिँ बनाउनु भो उहाँले गोर्खा नाम राख्नु भएन उहाँ नेपालै राख्नु भयो उहाँले आफ्नो राजधानी गोर्खामा राख्नु भएन उहाँले चाहिँ काठमाडौँमा राख्नु 250 वर्ष पहिला उहाँको भिजन कस्तो फार साइटेड थियो। आज हामी सङ्कुचित भएर के छ भने के अरे जातीय खोज्छौँ, कहिले आफ्नैतिर खोज्छौँ। पछि त उहाँ यस्तो कन्भिन्स भयो भने आइएम सरी नै भन्न थाल्नु। मैले भने होइन, मैले त खालि एउटा भ्यू प्रेजेन्ट गरेँ। मधेसमा मैले पेपर प्रेजेन्ट गर्दाखेरि त मेरो घरै जलाउने सुरुमा गर्नुभयो के हो। म यहीँ चाहिँ पार्लियामेन्टेरियनहरूलाई पेपर प्रेजेन्ट गर्दाखेरि एक मधेस एक प्रदेश चाहिँ यो मधेसीहरूलाई नै घाटा हुन्छ भनेर चन्दा शाह, लालबाबु पण्डित, रेणु यादव समथिङ थियो, उहाँले सुरुमै बोल्नै दिनु भएन। मैले कुरा सुनिदिनुहोस् न, पहिला एक मधेस एक प्रदेश राख्नुभयो भने अलिकति मैले ब्रिफी मात्रै गरेँ। राख्नुभयो भने यो कस्तो हुन्छ भने 50% मधेसीहरू छन्, एउटै राज्यपाल, एउटै मुख्यमन्त्री, एउटै शिक्षा मन्त्री, एउटै सेक्रेटेरिएट हुन्छ, यता 5 जना हुन्छन्। भोलि चाहिँ भोटिङ भयो भने हामी पनि अल्पमतमा पर्छौँ। 50% जनसङ्ख्यामा एउटै मुख्यमन्त्री, एउटै राज्यपाल, यता 50% जनामा 5वटा राज्यपाल। है त म नै मान्दिनँ, तपाईँको कुरा त अर्को कुरा, हामीले त्यसो भनेकै थिएन। त मलाई के लाग्यो भाइ, म प्राउड गर्दिनँ, तर दाजुभाइ दिदीबहिनीलाई मैले यसो गर्दाखेरि उहाँले पनि दिएर। त मैले के भने अहिले जुन प्रब्लमहरू आइरहेछन् त्यो प्रब्लममा हामीले बहस डिबेट गर्दैन। म अहिले निवेदन गरेँ, नेपाली दाजुभाइ दिदीबहिनीहरू मोर टलरेट, पिस छन्, ओबिडियन्ट छन्, हार्मोनी छन्, प्रोस्पेरेसन छन्। तर हामीले के हो भने सम अफ द एलिमेन्ट्स भनौँ कि मैले पार्टी भनौँ कि लिडर त भन्दिनँ, उहाँहरूले पर्सनल बेनिफिटको लागि यस्ता कुराहरू निकाल्नुहुन्छ। म त एकाडेमिक एरिया त धेरै पहिला छोडिसकेका थिएँ, मैले पनि लेख्ने पढ्ने गरेका थिएँ, त 10-12 वर्ष भयो मैले छोडिसकेका थिएँ। त थ्याङ्क्स फर द अर्गनाइजर हु इन्भाइटेड मी फर द एक्सप्रेस माई भ्यू द्याट। त मैले भन्दाखेरि अब फर्टकमिङमा फेडरलिजममा प्रब्लम के हो भनेर 1-2टा प्रब्लम छ। हामीले फेडरलिजमको फेडरेसन 3टा कुराहरूले गरेका हौँ। एउटा कुरा के हो भने कमिङ टुगेदर, होल्डिङ टुगेदर र गेटिङ टुगेदर। नेपाली दाजुभाइ दिदीबहिनीमा गेटिङ टुगेदर के छ भने 3R को चाहिँ प्रब्लमहरूले गरे, रिकग्निसन, रिप्रेजेन्टेसन र एक्सेस टु रिसोर्स। उहाँले चाहिँ आलोक सरले पनि आफ्नो कुराहरू राख्नुभयो। हाम्रो रिकग्निसन त भयो तर रिप्रेजेन्टेसन भएन। रिप्रेजेन्टेसन फर इन्स्टान्स मैले एउटा कुरा के भनौँ भने उहाँले पनि कोअलिसन गभर्मेन्टको प्रब्लम के हो भने अहिले तपाईँले सेन्ट्रल गभर्मेन्टमा हेर्नुभयो भने कति दलित छन्, कति मुस्लिम छन्, कति महिला छन् र कति चाहिँ अरू कास्टहरू छन्, तपाईँले आफै निकाल्न सक्नुहुन्छ। कुनै मुस्लिम छैन, कुनै चाहिँ दलित छैन। जबकि हामी इन्क्लुसिभ डेमोक्रेसी चाहिँ हामीले समावेशी पूर्ण प्रजा लोकतन्त्रको कुराहरू चाहिँ 12 बुन्दे अथवा के जनआन्दोलन सेकेन्डमा चाहिँ हामी निकालेका थियौँ। त्यति मात्र होइन, तपाईँले चाहिँ अब फेडरल सिस्टम प्रोभिन्समा जानुभयो भने उहाँको पनि मुस्लिम, दलित, महिलाहरूको रिप्रेजेन्टेसन पनि त्यस्तै छ। एकजना सोधेछ, मेरो त 30 सेकेन्ड, कि तपाईँहरूले यसरी किन गर्नुभयो भने उहाँले के भन्नुभयो भने म 1 मिनट खतम गर्छु, होइन मलाई भन्ने बित्तिकै म स्टप गर्छु। म हाउसमा पनि त्यही गर्थेँ। उहाँले के गर्यो भने इट इज द के अरे प्रब्लम अफ द कोअलिसन गभर्मेन्ट। द चिफ मिनिस्टर हेज नो पावर टु सेलेक्ट द मिनिस्टर बिकज अफ द कोअलिसन गभर्मेन्ट। यसमा एउटा कुरा के हो भने यो सम्झौताको दस्तावेज हो। मैले योभन्दा पहिला नै कस्तो प्रकारको पोलिटिकल सिस्टम हुनुपर्ने हो मैले लेखिसकेका हो। तपाईँ यहाँहरूले पनि पढ्नुभयो कि मलाई थाहा भएन। केही कुराहरू म पुरा द होल रिस्पोन्सिबिलिटी म लिन्छु चाहिँ कमादेखि फुल स्टपका यो कन्स्टिट्युसनलाई। तर कन्स्टिट्युसन एउटा कुरा म निवेदन गरौँ, यो सम्झौताको दस्तावेज हो र हामीले फेरि एउटा डिबेट गरौँ कि पोलिटिकल सिस्टमलाई, निर्वाचन प्रणालीलाई यसमा चाहिँ उ भएर यस्तो पोजिसन आएको हो कि, र यो पोजिसन आएपछि एउटा सबभन्दा ठुलो के हो भने पोलिटिसियनहरूले जहिले पनि चाहिँ के हो भने पब्लिक हुन्छन्, ऊ पब्लिक इन्ट्रेस्ट सर्भ गर्छन्। तर अहिले हामीले के देख्यौँ भने ऊ पार्टी पनि होइन, पेटी पनि होइन, पर्सनल इन्ट्रेस्ट सर्भ गरिरहेको छ। डेमोक्रेसी चाहिँ सस्टेन गर्नको लागि म एउटा अम्बेडकर चाहिँ र के अरे विवेकानन्दमा गएको थिएँ। उहाँहरूलाई सोधेँ तपाईँहरूको यो साउथ एसियामा, इन्डियामा कसरी चाहिँ डेमोक्रेसी सस्टेन भएको, स्ट्रेन्थन भएको? उहाँले कन्स्टिट्युसनले होइन, संहिताले होइन, पोलिटिकल लिडरको चाहिँ अनेस्टीले भएको। तो नीड के भने पोलिटिसियन अलवेज थिङ्क नेक्स्ट इलेक्सन, लिडरसिप अलवेज थिङ्क्स नेक्स्ट जेनेरेसन। हाम्रो आवश्यकता चाहिँ लिडरसिपको, जो एकचोटि उहाँले लिड गर्न सक्ने। हामी मधेसमा गयौँ, मधेसीहरूलाई देख्यो, मधेसीहरूलाई उचालिदियो, जनजातिमा गयो, जनजातिमा उचालिदियो, के अरे महिलामा गए गर्ने पनि केही होइन। त्यसकारण अहिलेको जुन एउटा समस्या आएछ त्यो समस्या यहाँ हो। दोस्रो समस्या एउटा करप्सन पनि ठुलो चाहिँ समस्या हो। म गएको छु, अहिले हालसाल पनि गएको थिएँ, म पहिले पनि गएको थिएँ। अहिले उहाँले पनि एउटा पार्लियामेन्ट्री कोर्सको कुराहरू निकाल्नुभयो। यो उपभोक्ता समितिमा आफ्नै मान्छेहरूलाई, आफ्नै नातागोताहरूलाई चाहिँ के छ भने उपभोक्ता बनाउने र आफ्नो पकेटहरू पैसा दिने। म एउटा निवेदन गएर म सघाउँछु। म पनि पार्लियामेन्टमा बसेँ र यो कुराहरू सुनेपछि मैले एउटा कुरा के गरेँ कि मेरो चाहिँ कोषबाट एकजना पनि उपभोक्ता समितिमा मेरो नातागोता कोही हुनु हुँदैन, नम्बर 1। नम्बर 2, मैले डिसिजन दिने होइन, एउटा पार्टीले डिसिजन दिनु होइन, त्यहाँको सिभिल सोसाइटी लोकलहरू मिलेर डिसिजन दिनु कहाँ के गर्ने हो। र लास्टमा के गर्ने हो भने एक एक पैसाको हिसाब जिल्ला विकास समितिको सूचना बोर्डमा राख्नुपर्छ। मैले छुँदा पनि छैन, धेर्दा पनि होइन, किनकि अहिले पनि त्यही प्रब्लम भइरहेछ। पहिलाको इलेक्सनमा पनि के अरे फर्स्ट कन्स्टिट्युसन इलेक्सनमा पनि त्यही प्रब्लमहरू आइरहेको थियो। अर्थात् मैले के भने अहिले गणतन्त्र, अहिले चाहिँ संघीयता, अहिले चाहिँ के छ भने धर्मनिरपेक्षता, यो कुराहरू चाहिँ एकदमै चाहिँ के छ भने क्रिटिकल पोजिसनमा छ, प्याराडक्स सिचुएसनमा छ। यसलाई बचाउने चाहिँ यो पोलिटिकल पार्टीहरू पनि छँदैछ, हाम्रो सिभिल सोसाइटी, एकाडेमिसियनहरूले मैले हाम्रो मुलुकको हितमा के कस्तो गर्ने हो भने एउटा कुराहरू गरेर सोचिदिनु भए राम्रो हुन्थ्यो। लास्टमा मैले त रिसोर्सको कुरै गरेन। रिसोर्सको कुरा गर्ने हो भने मेरो त इकोनोमिक्स होइन, म इकोनोमिक्स बुझ्दा पनि बुझ्दैन। यो जहाँ पनि कन्फ्लिक्ट हुन्छन्, बिहार र उत्तर प्रदेशका चिफ गभर्मेन्टले चाहिँ सेन्ट्रल गभर्मेन्टलाई मलाई बढी पैसा देऊ भनेर भन्छन्, आन्ध्र प्रदेश र केरला के भन्छन् म एक पैसा दिँदा पनि दिँदैन, लिँदा पनि दिँदैन, म आफ्नो बेनिफिट किन सेयर गर्ने। कन्फ्लिक्ट त जहाँ हुन्छ। फेडरल सिस्टममा चाहिँ कोअपरेटिभ हो कि कम्पिटेटिभ हो, र यसलाई चाहिँ कन्फ्लिक्टलाई कसरी चाहिँ मिनिमाइज गर्ने हो यसप्रति चाहिँ हामीले गऱ्यो भने। तर सबभन्दा पहिला के हो भने ड्राइभर राम्रो भएन भने, गाडी जति पनि राम्रो भयो भने ऊ चाहिँ एक्सिडेन्ट हुन्छन्, राम्रोसँग चलाउन सक्दैन। कन्स्टिट्युसनमा म अम्बेडकरमा उस फाउन्डेसनमा गएको थिएँ, अनि मलाई 15 मिनट टाइम दिएको थियो, अनि मैले उहाँले के भन्नुभयो, योर कन्स्टिट्युसन इज के अरे भेरी डिस्क्रिमिनेटिभ, नट गुड फर द पिपुल, एन्ड आई हेभ एक्सप्रेस्ड 15 minutes about the constitution, and I got more than 1 hour to express my constitution, and the diplomat and the army and Ambedkar, Swami Vivekananda Foundation, the participant told your constitution is far better than our constitution. तो मैले भन्दाखेरि के हो भने कन्स्टिट्युसनका दोष नदेऊ, केही सम्झौताका दस्तावेज हुनाको प्रो एन्ड कन्स होला, तर चाहिँ के हो भने एक्टरै राम्रो भएन भने बडा गाह्रो हुन्छ कुनै पनि कुराले चाहिँ। र मलाई समय सकिसक्यो। मलाई अर्गनाइजरले मौका दिनुभयो, बिपिन सरले मौका दिनुभयो, मैले छोडिसकेका थिएँ, म आउट अफ चाहिँ एकाडेमिकमा उसमा गइसकेका थिएँ, फेरि म आएँ, म कस्तो बोलेँ के बोलेँ, धेरै यसमा चाहिँ तलमाथि होला, तर म एउटा निवेदन गर्छु, यसले राम्रो कुरा होला भने यहाँले अर्गनाइजरलाई दिनुहोला, केही नराम्रो कुराहरू मैले बोल्या होला त्यसको चाहिँ होल रिस्पोन्सिबिलिटी म आफै लिन्छु, मलाई गाली गर्नुहोला। धन्यवाद, नमस्कार।
थ्याङ्क यू लालबाबु, प्रोफेसर लालबहादुर ज्यू। अलिकति समय बढी लिइदिनु भएको छ, मैले नोटिस गर्दा गर्दा पनि उहाँ अलिकति उ गर्नुभयो, ठिकै छ। अब हाम्रो नेक्स्ट प्रेजेन्टर इज डक्टर Mohammad Rizwan Islam from Bangladesh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon to all the dignitaries and esteemed colleagues present in the room. Without wasting time, if I may directly move to the 3 papers. And before I talk about the 3 papers, it makes me amazed to see that how many colleagues have been so patiently listening to all the sessions and contributing after 5 or 6 sessions since yesterday. And I think that says a lot about the organizers' planning and also about the richness of the discourse. So I think we all can applaud the presenters for their excellent presentation. Now, if I may move to Mr. Alok's presentation, as he has argued, in my view, that Indian Central Finance Commission, that role is nowhere in the Constitution mentioned as mandatory. That the recommendations the Commission makes is not as such binding on the federal government. But nonetheless, most of their recommendations on most occasions, irrespective of the party lines, they are respected. Now, I wonder that maybe that has something to do with the tradition and the prestige that the institution has acquired. And maybe it is also, although as far as I can recall, neither in the paper or nor in his presentation there was this claim, but I understand, or it was, I think, implicit in his presentation, that this body consists of people who are well-respected economists or policymakers. So if we make a comparison to the Indian state finance commissions, as he was suggesting that many of the inputs that they receive is inadequate, and the outcomes, the suggestions they make, they are often ignored. And I agree with him in principle that yes, if they could have access to more information, and technology has made it much easier. At times, technology has been so invasive, I at times wonder, who knows more about me, my wife or Google? Depending on how much time I am surfing the internet. So yes, if technology is at our disposal, if the commission, being a policy-making body or a policy recommendatory body, if it can use those information properly, maybe it would have more authority. But I wonder, would it also be an issue of the image of those state bodies or who are sitting in those bodies? Would that also be a factor? I think that's a question that maybe we can think of. If I may move on to Ms. Sadiksha's very informative paper, as I gather from not just her presentation, but also from the other presentations since yesterday, I think one point is very clear, that Nepal's federalism is in a way sui generis. It's very unique. It is not like the US. It may have been somewhat inspired by what has happened in neighboring India in its federalism movement, but it is very unique to Nepal. And as I understand, even there is a great degree of reluctance, as one of the commentators in the second session was mentioning, that central government even is very lukewarm to the idea of police force being controlled at a provincial level for either real reasons or perceived fears, whatever that only Nepalis can say. But when I think of a federal government, I think of some sort of police powers, some sort of police authority will be also vested in the state levels. That's what I would have thought about a federal state. So I would imagine that the way the federalism in Nepal has developed and it is evolving, it is quite different from the other 20 odd other countries across the world. And the constitutional detours, or if I may put it that way, the norms on the constitution itself, the written norms, and the practice in last 8 years or so in Nepal may not have always been on the same trajectory. But based on that, if we make a suggestion, or if we make a point that those forces who are for development, or who use development as a discourse and want to have centralized power on the one hand, and those who say about self-determination, they are somehow development is not their main priority, identity is their main priority. In my humble submission, I think it is an artificial ways. I would not imagine that just because you want to see more economic development across the country, you need less federalism or vice versa. I would imagine that it is more about the commitment of the politicians than about the constitutional scheme in itself. Now, if I may move to the third presenter, as I understand from his paper, that political parties in Nepal and the federal culture in Nepal is somewhat in a disjunct. That when we look at the federal level, the political parties, the federal forces, they have a tendency to have more force at the center, whereas at the local level, I mean the third tier of the government, they have more vocal voices in talking for their electorates. And in between, the provincial governments, as I understand, is slightly weaker or less vocal. I wonder, does it have something to do with the local government being more closely aligned with their electorates? Are they more forced to be more responsive to their electorates? If it is so, maybe if federalism in Nepal has to develop further, has to nourish further, maybe there has to be a close nexus between, I would say, the federal culture at the constitutional level and in the political parties. Because unless the political parties are really upholding the spirit of federalism, unless the center wants to cede some of its constitutional powers as the constitution demands to the provincial level, unless they have more faith in the provincial government being able to deliver, there is a problem here. And I also understand, although I think the presenter hasn't really directly talked on that, but in a way, the provincial politicians at times appears to be beholden to the central powers too much. That instead of thinking about their own province's interest or the people who may have elected them, they are, with some exceptions, of course, I cannot generalize, but it seems that they are more toying with the federal political forces than they are making their own demands for their provinces. So if that disconnect between the political parties and the federal movement is there, I guess in last 5 decades or so, there have been as many as 7 constitutions in Nepal. I guess there will be not just constitutional detours, maybe there will be something more dramatic. I, of course, do not have the crystal ball, and I'm not a historian of Nepal's history or Nepal's constitutional history. But if that sort of a disconnect is there, I would imagine that maybe something more would unfold in the coming decade or so. With that note, thank you all once again for your patient hearing.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rizwan. अब चाहिँ फ्लोरलाई टाइम दिएको छु को चाहिँ इन्ट्रेस्टेड हुनुहुन्छ एकजना हाम्रो हुम्लाको साथी हुनुहुन्छ उहाँ विजय उहाँलाई दिन्छ ए दुईजना विजय ओहो धेरैजना पो हो त ल विजयजीलाई हुम्लाको साथी उहाँ अध्यक्ष हुनुहुन्छ सिमीकोट गाउँपालिकाको नगरपालिकाको
सबैलाई पुनः नमस्कार छ म हुम्लाको सिमकोट गाउँपालिकाको अध्यक्ष मेरो नाम विजय भण्डारी मेरो भनाइ हाम्रो सदिच्छाजीले राख्नु भएको कुरामा मेरो केही मत मात्र राख्न खोजेको र यो माओवादी युद्ध र यो मधेसको आन्दोलनमा उहाँले के अरे तथाकथित शब्द गर्नुभएको थियो हैन यो तथाकथित भन्दा पनि अब भौतिक रूपले क्षतिहरू धेरै भयो होला तर यो नेपालको इतिहासमा राजनीतिक र सामाजिक परिवर्तन गर्नको निम्ति र यो संघीयता स्थापना गर्नको निम्ति र यो आम दूरदराजका जनतालाई जागरण ल्याउनको निम्ति माओवादी आन्दोलन भनेको एउटा ऐतिहासिक कोसेढुङ्गा हो भन्ने मेरो भनाइ मदो हैन। यो तथाकथित भन्ने होइन। सायद हामीले त्यो आन्दोलन हुँदैन थियो भनेदेखि नै अझै पनि हामी रहिथि नै हुन्थ्यौँ होला जस्तो लाग्छ। एउटा यो उहाँपर भनाइ एउटा यो मेरो मत भयो। र अर्को हाम्रो प्राध्यापक दास मानन्दर सरको उप्रति उहाँले यो अहिलेको सङ्घीयतामा यो भागबन्डा र कार्यकर्ता संरक्षणको कुराहरू र एउटा सत्ता टिकाउनको निम्ति यो जुन अहिलेको हाम्रो यो दलीय व्यवस्था छ र प्रधानमन्त्री राष्ट्रको हुनुपर्ने, तर ऊ जितेर आउनको निम्ति उसको निर्वाचन क्षेत्र चाहिने जुन किसिमको प्रवृत्ति छ, यसलाई अन्त्य गरेर देशको कार्यकारी प्रत्यक्ष निर्वाचित प्रणालीबाट आउने, हामी हुम्ली जनताको पनि भोट लिने, झापाको पनि लिने, ताप्लेजुङको पनि भोट लिने गरेर त्यसरी आयो भनेदेखि नै मात्रै यो सङ्घीयता अलिक टिकाउ हुन्थ्यो कि एउटा कुरा। र अर्को कुरा, यो सङ्घीयतामा यो धेरै बोझहरू पनि भयो। जस्तै अब यो संरचनाहरू धेरै संरचनाहरू पनि भए र अधिकार क्षेत्रको कार्यविभाजनको हिसाबले सङ्घको सरकारले कुन काम गर्ने, कस्ता योजनाहरू विनियोजित गर्ने, 5 लाखको योजना सङ्घबाट दिने, 5 लाखको योजना प्रदेशले दिने, 5 लाखको योजना हामी गाउँपालिकाले पनि बनाउने हो भनेदेखि नै त्यो तीनैवटा तह किन चाहियो एउटा कुरा। र अर्को कुरा, जस्तै प्रदेशको पनि एउटा जिल्लामा कार्यालय हुनैपर्ने, सङ्घको पनि हुनैपर्ने, स्थानीय तह त छँदैछ भनेदेखि नै यी भारी भरकमका यी संरचना पनि खारेज गर्यो भनेदेखि नै खर्च कटौती हुन्थ्यो कि र सङ्घीयतालाई अलिकति आर्थिक रूपमा पनि अलि मितव्ययी बनाउन सकिन्थ्यो कि भन्ने कुराहरू मेरो विचार राखेँ। धन्यवाद।
My question goes to Mohandas ji. Mohandas ji, a long time back, philosopher Bertrand Russell wrote an article, an essay on leaders and followers. He contended that the leaders are born, followers are also born. You know, you didn't pick up the issue of greed. Every politician has some ambition. I do have my ambition to earn that much money. Politicians might have the ambition to go above. But if it is added with greed, then there comes a lot of problem. You know that. So I would like to cite an example of Franklin Roosevelt. Franklin Roosevelt from 1933 to 45 was elected 4 times, and with exasperated Americans. So in 1951, February 27th, they enacted the 22nd Amendment of the Constitution, that no president can be elected for 2 times. So how you see this greed? You have not, it's a very good paper that we have presented here, but what about the greed that I would like to point out right now? Thank you very much.
Next.
Thank you, Chair, for your time. My name is Ashish Paudel. I am board member of Youth in Federal Discourse. Interesting paper was presented today, and thank you for the presentation. First and foremost, I'd like to direct the question to Mohan Das Manandhar, sir. I do understand how coalition politics undermines federalism in Nepal, definitely portrays the current status quo in the political party. Having said this, as a law student, they always say, you know, your country does have a lot of problems. Please try to find solutions for it. And when I was going through your paper, I do get few things how coalition-based parties, this problem can be solved. And one of the examples could be Madhesh-based political party, a regional party, or Bhaktapur's Nemakipa, certain location-based party. Also, I think Alok sir can correct me if I'm wrong. When someone says me Maharashtra, I see Shiv Sena. When someone says UP, I see Samajwadi Party. It's one of the solution is to have some provincial level parties as well, or have you cognized any few solutions so that, you know, to a bigger political parties in Nepali Congress, Maoist, where leaders are very skeptic of not doing this Bhagbanda politics, and even if I go and say them that don't do based politics, will definitely not adhere to my recommendation, and what sort of solution are you going to bring on the table? So what could be the solution? First question, sir. I'll just take one last question, sir. To Alok, sir. Sir, on your paper, you have used this word granular data in your paper, and because that is the solution that you provide for different state institutions. What I'm concerned about this is the issue of privacy. And probably if you could also touch upon how could state institution also address the issue of right to privacy, which remains as a constitutional right in India or in Nepal as well. Thank you so much, Chair. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Juddha ji. Mr. Alok, I'm going directly to you. Just wanted to understand the tax regime and distribution of tax in India. When I see that the central and state GST, what was the mechanism they made for the distribution of the money? And can you just mention another thing, that what is the percentage of the total tax regime of India divided between state, province, the central government, state and local bodies? And this is my Sadikshya, you have a fantastic paper you presented. I like it very much. It's very nice that if you could just add that what is experiences today, the federal setup, we have already almost 6 years in practice. So what are the laws passed by the parliament, central parliament, by the state parliament, where they conflict to each others, and where the constitution is avoided by the central parliament and central government when they pass the bill of the forest bill and many bills they passed against the constitution. While discussing about the police force and all, central government does not have any mandate as per the Nepalese constitution to have a security as the state level police force. So in one of the meeting I said that Nepal police does not exist. So it's Madhesh police, it's Kosi police, it's Gandaki police, which is in India also and many of the countries and in USA also. So if that could be included in your paper, it will be very fantastic. Thank you, Manandhar ji. Tamaiko to dherai ramro cha hai. Thank you.
Dhanyavad. The ladies.
Hi everyone, I'm Sadikshya from Oxford Policy Management. I had a question for Ms. Dulal. It was an excellent paper. I'm fascinated with the whole self-determination as a basis for federalism or a trigger for federalism in Nepal, which is pretty unique. Could you tell me a little bit about how that has evolved since when federalism was introduced? Thank you.
Namaste, my name is Pushpa Dangal and I am a BLLB 4th year student in Kathmandu School of Law. So the discussion on federalism emerged among the general people in the context of Nepal when I was in school. And during that time, a lot of ethnic-based group demanded for separate province. And the social media was flooded with a lot of hate comments based on ethnic group, and a lot of ethnic groups also emerged on the street, marching on the street, demanding for the separate province. What I'm trying to communicate here is, prior to that, I had never seen such kind of hatred and such kind of divisions in the Nepali society. It's not like my hair has grown white and I have lived a lot of life, but till that point of time, I had never seen such kind of hatred. So even a couple of months back, certain ethnic group posted a video of having cow meat that was posted in a very provocative manner. And at times when I think of federalism, I feel that it has seeded or planted some sort of hatred and divisions in the Nepali society. So my question is, will I be wrong if I said that federalism has planted divisions and hatred among certain ethnic groups in Nepali society? Will I be wrong? So my question is either to Sadikshya ma'am or Professor Yadav, whoever is more comfortable. I'd love to hear from them. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Last question नगरौँ होला भनेर क्लोज गरौँ होला भनेर मैले 2-3 जनालाई रोकेँ हाम्रो टाइम प्रेसरले गर्दा अब हाम्रो आन्सर गर्ने छेउबाट सुरु गरौँ सदीक्षाबाट यसो आन्सर गर्नलाई म अनुरोध गर्दछु
There were 4 questions to me and I'll try and answer as quickly as possible. To the young gentleman who asked about regional parties, I would like you to look up the work of Mr. K.K. Kailash. He's a professor at the University of Hyderabad. He draws a distinction between regional parties and regionalist parties. Of the two examples that you gave, I would say the Samajwadi Party is a regional party, but the Shiv Sena in Maharashtra is a regionalist party. And the reason has to do with their ideology. Samajwadi Party can expand to 10 other states and it will remain the same. Shiv Sena is focused essentially on the identity of Marathi speakers. It can't expand that much. 1-2 seats here or there, elsewhere it might win. So its identity and ideology is tied up to the regional concern of the people living in the state of Maharashtra. So yes, India's federalism has been strengthened. I think the original regionalist party was the Dravida Kazhagam or the Dravida Munnetra Kazhagam, as you may have heard later, and many other parties which have sprung up from different parts. That said, even the so-called national parties contributed to federalism when they were at the state level. Prime Minister Modi used to be a huge proponent of federalism when he was chief minister. He is a different position now. Likewise, Congress chief ministers are now the huge proponents of federalism when they are not in the central government. But that's just to address the point. Second point on privacy, it's a very valid concern, and as I've pointed out in my paper, it is something which you'll have, which the body will have to take into account, and as far as possible, take anonymized data into question. You don't need to know the name of a person, age of a person, if you want to know the number of cell phones which are active in the region of Kathmandu. So it's possible, and I think they should do so. Sir, on the center and state GST, how GST works, if I can take 2 minutes, I'll just explain. In India, when let's say I buy a phone, there will be central GST and there will be state GST. 50-50 division is there. So if it is 18% tax, 9% goes to center, 9% goes to state. The 9% which goes to state, state keeps in its pocket, doesn't have to share anything. The money goes, an elaborate mechanism is there, but the money goes, all that 9% goes to the state. With the 9% which goes to the center, that has to be divided in the formula that the Finance Commission gives. That formula is 59-41. So if center gets 100 rupees in GST, irrespective of where it's getting from, it will share only in accordance with the formula that Finance Commission has set. So it's not like if I buy this in Bangalore and the state of Karnataka, Karnataka will get a share of the center's 9% tax. They will only get that small part which the Finance Commission has said that you will get. Finally, on division of the revenue, this is a slightly difficult question to answer, and I'll tell you why. Finance Commission only divides tax revenues. It does not divide revenues collected by cesses, revenues collected by way of royalty, let's say dividend revenue of the central government. All of those, Finance Commission has no say. From those amounts, central government gives discretionary grants. They might say, we think the state of Bihar is very poor, we should give them more money. They can do that. Central government might say, we are coming up with a new scheme where we want to give every girl child a bicycle or something. And again, the money will go to the states and say, please give them bicycles. Money won't go directly from central government to that child. It will go to the state. So that is also money coming to the state. But it is specific. You have to use it for this purpose. Now, Finance Commission, last Finance Commission had said, center should give money directly to local government also. Because state governments are not doing such a good job about it. So it's a long way of saying that percentage is very hard to calculate. You'll have to look at the budgets of center, 30 state governments, and 15,000 local governments to be able to show. But I'm just giving you the mechanism to tell you how money flows from center to states to local governments. Thank you.
Thank you. Sadikshya ji, तपाईको केही छ? मोहनजीले गर्नुहुन्छ.
Sorry, 2 questions that I will answer. One is about the उहाँको तपाईको प्रसङ्ग. हामीले यो प्रोभिन्सियल पार्टी हुनुपर्छ भन्ने खुब लबिङ गर्यौँ क्या. एक्टमा मिनेन्द्र सर पनि हुनुहुन्छ, उहाँले भन्नुहुन्छ. तर अब ठुलो पार्टीले चाहिँ मानेन, नेसनल पार्टी र पार्टी, अनि त्यसको अफकोर्स अब मिनिमम थ्रेसहोल्ड राख्यो होइन. राखेको भए स्टेट लेभलको प्रोभिन्सियल पार्टी राखेको भए चाहिँ यो इस्यु अलिक फरक हुन्थ्यो र यसको पोलिटिकल डाइमेन्सन पनि एकदम फरक हुन्थ्यो. इट वुड ह्याभ बिन. वी वान्टेड टु ह्याभ द्याट प्रोभिजन फर प्रोभिन्सियल पार्टिज, बट इट डिन्ट ह्याड ड्युरिङ नेगोसिएसन इट डिन्ट सो सोल्युसन चाहिँ ठिक हो तपाईँले भनेको सेकेन्ड इस्यु उहाँले भनेको इन टर्म्स अफ हेट्रेड चाहिँ बेसिकली तपाईँ रङ हो किनभने यदि त्यो हेट्रेड छ भने त्यो कन्टेन्सियस इस्यु आउने प्लेटफर्म चाहिँ क्रिएट हुनुपर्छ त्यो क्रिएट भएन भने चाहिँ त्यसपछि सोसियल मिडियामा छताछुल्लो हुन्छ त्यसैले कन्टेन्सियस इस्यु छ होइन धेरै वर्ष पहिलेको अब भनौँ न 250-270 वर्ष अगाडिदेखिको जुन डिस्क्रिमिनेटरी स्ट्रक्चर छ नि स्पेसली मुल्की ऐनले दिएको हिन्दू वर्णाश्रमको डिस्क्रिमिनेटरी स्ट्रक्चर छ त्यसले सर्टन ग्रुपलाई चाहिँ डिस्क्रिमिनेट गरेको छ अछुतै बनाएको छ नि मान्छेलाई अब छुनै नपाउने अब जनावर त होइन नि हो बाई बर्थ जनावरको पनि आउँदैन नि मान्छे त होइन न त्यस्तो भएको त्यो जुन उनीहरूले आफूलाई एक्सप्रेस उसले गर्न नपाएको अपर्च्युनिटिज मधेसहरूको केसमा पनि छ इभन होइन 21 सालसम्म त मधेसीहरू काठमाडौँमा आउँदाखेरि थानकोटमा भिसा लिनु पर्थ्यो भिसाले पासपोर्ट लिनलाई 7 वर्ष लाग्थ्यो धेरै कुराहरू छ जुन कुराले चाहिँ एक्सेस टु रिसोर्सेसमा चाहिँ स्टेटले ब्यारियर बनायो त्यसैले त्यो कुरालाई चाहिँ एड्रेस गर्नै पर्छ अब आइडेन्टिटी हुने कि के हुने कि त्यो पोलिटिकल प्रोसेस हो तर त्यो कन्टेक्स्टमा चाहिँ लार्ज स्केलमा यो ग्रिभान्सेस आएकै हो अब त्यो हेट्रेडमा कन्भर्ट किन भयो भन्दाखेरि हामीले त्यो कन्टेन्सियस इस्युजलाई चाहिँ एड्रेस गर्ने एउटा फ्रेमवर्क बनाउन सकेनौँ केही हदसम्म कन्स्टिट्युसन एसेम्ब्लीले गर्यो केही हदसम्म अहिले लोकल गभर्मेन्टले गरेकै छ क्या हेऱ्यो भने थाहा हुन्छ होइन त्यस कारण पनि यो त्यति धेरै छैन अहिले एक्चुअली तर केही हदसम्म चाहिँ यो थियो दुःख पोख्ने ठाउँ हुनुपर्छ अब त्यो हेट्रेडमा कन्भर्ट भयो किनकि त्यो कहीँनिर एड्रेस चाहिँ गर्नुपर्छ सिटिजन हो नि त हामी सोभरेन हो नि त सिटिजन सबैलाई इक्वल राइट त हुनु पऱ्यो नि त परेन जसले क्लेम गर्छ उसको त क्लेम सुनिदिनु पऱ्यो नि त अब उसले पुरा गर्न सक्दैन त रिसोर्सको लागि स्ट्रक्चरको लागि के होला तर स्ट्रक्चरल चाहिँ डिस्क्रिमिनेटरी ब्यारियर हुनु भएन क्या अब भनौँ न आर्मीमा वुमेनहरूलाई लिँदैन थियो हेर्नु फर्स्टमा क्लियर थियो होइन चेन्ज हुँदै गयो नि त अब त्यो हुनुपर्छ भन्ने हो त्यसरी you do not push that narrative saying that you are the one who created hatred भनेको you are basically accusing the minority and vulnerables. You need to understand that very carefully because those who are elite can do that. Those who are vulnerable do not have a voice. And if you are accusing them, then you are destroying their human rights. So that's all I just wanted to say.
म पहिला तपाईँको क्वेसन आन्सर गर्दा चाहिँ अघि जुन केही लिगल डकुमेन्ट्सले लिगल मेकानिजम्सहरूले नै पनि यो 3 तहको सरकारमा चाहिँ कन्फ्युजन क्रिएट गरेको छ कि भन्नेमा चाहिँ गरेको छ आज बिहानकै सेसनमा पनि हामीले वित्तीय संस्थाको जुन एनएनआरएफसीको बारेमा डिस्कसन भएको थियो त्यो बेला थरोली डिस्कस्ड भयो कसरी चाहिँ सर्टन एक्ट्सहरूले चाहिँ एनएनआरएफसीलाई कन्स्टिट्युसनले दिएको म्यान्डेट फलो गर्न पनि अरू एक्जिक्युटिभ ल र एक्टहरूले चाहिँ त्यो गर्न सक्ने बनाएको छैन रोक लगाइदिएको छ र त्यो मात्रै नभएर जुन एक्सक्लुसिभ र कन्करेन्ट पावर्स दिएको छ तिनै तहलाई यो चाहिँ सेड्युल्समा दिएको छ होइन कन्स्टिट्युसनको त्यसमा कन्करेन्टमा त जुदेको छ नै कति पावर्स र रेस्पोन्सिबिलिटिजहरू तर एक्सक्लुसिभ पावर्स पनि कतिमा चाहिँ क्लियर छैन त्यो पनि जुदेको छ सो त्यहाँनिर फर्मल मेकानिजम्समा पनि धेरै क्ल्यासेसहरू देखिन्छ अब इन्फर्मल मेकानिजम पहिलाको युनिटरी सिस्टमसँग जोडिएको जुन छ त्यसले त असर गर्ने नै भयो त्यो चाहिँ नेपालमा मात्रै होइन जताततै आज धेरैचोटि यसबारेमा कुरा भइसक्यो अरू फेडरेसन्सहरूमा पनि यस्तो समस्या यस्तो च्यालेन्जेस आउँछ तर हाम्रोमा चाहिँ लिगल प्रोभिजन्सहरू पनि छ जहाँ चाहिँ करेक्सन्सहरू बनाउनु पर्ने छ पहिलो क्वेसन I'll try and answer both the questions collectively. So एउटा चाहिँ ideas have power. हामीले एउटा याद राख्नुपर्ने कुरा चाहिँ ideas matter and they have power. सो तपाईँले जुन कुरा अघि रेज गर्नुभयो जुनमा चाहिँ हेट्रेड ल्याइदिन्छ कि भन्ने त्यो हेट्रेड आउनुभन्दा अगाडि डेभलपमेन्ट पनि आइडिया नै थियो जुन चाहिँ 1950s जब नेसनल प्लानिङ कमिसन भयो त्यो बेलादेखि नै उसले बनाएको फर्मुलेट गरेको प्लान्स तपाईँले हेर्नुभयो भने त्यो प्लान्सहरूको फोकस चाहिँ रिजनल डेभलपमेन्टमा छ त्यो हेर्दै जाँदाखेरि प्लान्समा इन्फ्रास्ट्रक्चर डेभलपमेन्ट हो र अब गर्नै पर्यो डेभलपमेन्ट मैले त्यसलाई क्वेसन गरेँ होइन तर त्यो आइडियाज पनि हो नि त अनि पोलिटिकल पार्टिज त्यतिखेरको लिडिङ पोलिटिकल पार्टिजहरूले चाहिँ त्यसैलाई आफ्नो म्यानिफेस्टोजहरूमा राख्नुभयो कि उहाँहरूले पनि अब नेपाली कङ्ग्रेसले त कहिले पनि एथनिक डिमान्ड्सलाई आफ्नो म्यानिफेस्टोमा राखेकै छैन तर युएमएलले सुरुमा जुन राखेको थियो त्यो पनि पछि गएर उहाँहरूको म्यानिफेस्टोज तपाईँले पढ्नुभयो भने 1990s 1994मा हेर्नुभयो भने बिस्तारै घट्दै गएको छ मेन्सन, र उहाँहरूले पनि इकोनोमिक लिबरलाइजेसन डेभलपमेन्ट त्यस्तोको कुराहरू चाहिँ आफ्नो म्यानिफेस्टोजमा राख्नु भएको छ। र यो पोलिटिकल पार्टिजहरूले जुन नरेटिभ ल्याउनु भयो त्यसले पनि हाम्रो मानसिकतालाई सेप गर्यो। सो दोज आइडियाज म्याटर टु। र पछि गएर जुन 1990sमा जब एक्टिभिस्ट फ्रम representing various indigenous nationalities started making claims based on ethnic identities, right? त्यो हुँदै सँगसँगै जुन माओइस्टको मुभमेन्ट पनि आयो, मधेसको पनि त्यसपछि क्याचअप गर्यो। सो त्यो 90s to 20sमा चाहिँ हो पावरफुल आइडियाज आयो जुन पहिला यो स्केलमा कहिले पनि आएको थिएन। र तपाईँले अघि मेन्सन गर्नुभयो सोसल मिडियाको, त्यो पनि पहिला थिएन। सो एउटा यस्तो टुल हाम्रो हातमा आयो जुनले चाहिँ अब युथको पनि आइडिया सेप गर्यो। पहिला चाहिँ सायद म नेपाल टिभी बसेर मेरो हजुरबासँग हेरेँ भने सायद थाहा पाउँथेँ नेपाली कङ्ग्रेस या युएमएलले के गर्यो, तर सोसल मिडियामा अब मलाई थाहा भयो अरूले पनि के गरिरहेछ भनेर। सो तपाईँले पहिलाको डेभलपमेन्टको पार्टले कसरी तपाईँको नरेटिभ सेप गर्यो चाहिँ हेर्नु भएन। तर पछिल्लो समयमा चाहिँ जुन आइरहेको थियो नि त्यो टाइममा जुन बेला तपाईँ सोसल मिडियामा हुनुहुन्थ्यो या हामीले हेऱ्यौँ त्यतिखेर चाहिँ इट सिम्ड लाइक वी वर ओन्ली हियरिङ वान पार्ट अफ द स्टोरी or these political parties and what they were demanding, right? So I think that partly answers your question. Also connecting that to your question, as I think I had to rush through the presentation in the later segment, but yeah, अहिले यदि स्टेट हेर्ने हो भने चाहिँ फेरि गएर यो डिस्कसन केमा आइरहेछ भने अटोनोमी छ कि छैन भन्नेमा चाहिँ हामी कुरा गरिरहेछौँ। बट द नरेटिभ अफ सेल्फ डिटर्मिनेसन इट्स नट इन्टायरली लस्ट आइरहेछ, किनभने आज बिहान आलोक posed a question. He asked if there's a parameter, if there are indicators to show whether or not we've achieved what we thought we would achieve, by becoming a federal state. So unfortunately, no, a lot remains to be done in that regard. Yes, we do have some representation, right? But again, we had Yadav sir question, if that's really happening. So yeah, अहिलेको पनि leading political parties को त stance त development कै narrative मा भएको भएर self determination को logic ले चाहिँ actually lose नै गरेछ भन्नु पर्ला। Thank you.
धन्यवाद। अहिले हाम्रो सेसनलाई अन्तिमतिर पुगिरहेको छौँ र म केही कुरा भनेर चाहिँ यो सेसन टुङ्ग्याउने विचारमा छु। हामी नेपालीहरूले फेडरलिजम स्टार्ट गरेको 8 वर्ष मात्रै हो। पहिलो चरणको चुनाव सकेर दोस्रो चरणको चुनावमा छौँ। त्यो संविधानमा भएको केही गल्तीहरू होला, लेखनमा त्रुटिहरू होला, हाम्रो बुझाइहरू कमजोर होला, बुझाउन हामीले कमजोरी गर्यौँ होला। ती इररहरूलाई करेक्सन गर्दै लगेर हाम्रो फेडरलिजमलाई चाहिँ एकदमै स्ट्रङ पारेर लानुपर्छ। हामी युनिक टाइपको फेडरलिजम छ। अहिले हाम्रो अच्युतले दिनुभएको 5 वटा जुन लोन अथवा ग्रान्टको कन्सेप्टमध्ये मैले चाहिँ हेर्ने चाहिँ नेचुरल रिसोर्सको जुन रोयल्टी हो, रोयल्टी डिस्ट्रिब्युसनमा हामीले नेपालको चाहिँ 5 वटा ऐनले 5 वटा क्षेत्रलाई नेचुरल रिसोर्स भनेर डिफाइन गरेको छ। पहिलो चाहिँ पर्वतारोहणबाट आउने रोयल्टी, दोस्रो चाहिँ वनबाट आउने रोयल्टी, तेस्रो चाहिँ हाइड्रो पावरबाट आउने, चौथो चाहिँ मिनरल्स एन्ड माइन्स एन्ड मिनरल्सबाट भनेको छ, र पाँचौँमा वाटर एन्ड अदर नेचुरल रिसोर्सेस भनेर भनेको छ। यो चारवटाको रोयल्टी त हामीले बाँडिरहेको छौँ र वन 753 पालिकामा छैन, 106 वटा पालिकामा वन छैन। तैपनि हाम्रो वनमा आउने रोयल्टीको मेकानिजम जिल्ला वन मार्फत आउने भएकोले हामी सबै पालिकाहरूलाई त्यही अनुसार हामीले बाँडेको छौँ। दोस्रो हाइड्रो पावर 140 वटा हाइड्रो पावरहरू छ। करिब 160-70 गाउँपालिकाहरूले त्योबाट आफ्नो रोयल्टी प्राप्त गर्छ। माउन्टेनरिङमा हाम्रो चाहिँ 1910 वटा चाहिँ 5800 भन्दा माथि हाइटका चाहिँ माउन्टेनहरू छ र 1310 वटाको नामकरण गरेको छ। 414 वटाको चाहिँ ओपन गरेको छ क्लाइम्बिङको लागि र आजको मितिसम्म 122 वटा क्लाइम्बिङको लागि अनुमति पाएको छ र करिब 130 वटा पालिकाहरूले त्यहाँबाट रोयल्टी सेयरिङ गरे हुन्छ। त्यसै गरेर अब खानी र खनिजको कुरा छ। करिब हाम्रो खनिजहरूको भएको क्षेत्रहरू भनेको हाइड्रो पावरको क्षेत्रहरू भनेको बढी मात्रामा चाहिँ म्याग्दी, लमजुङ, दोलखा, सिन्धुपाल्चोक र पूर्वी पहाडका 5 थर इलामको क्षेत्र सङ्घसभाको क्षेत्रमा छ भने माइनिङको क्षेत्रमा चाहिँ हाम्रो रुकुम, पाल्पा, दाङ, यो मकनपुरदेखि लिएर चाहिँ उदयपुरसम्मको क्षेत्रमा माइनिङको क्षेत्रहरू छ। त्यहाँबाट हाम्रो रोयल्टीहरू आएको छ। करिब 60 र गाउँपालिकाले त्यहाँबाट आउने रोयल्टीहरू पाउँछ भने पानी तथा अन्य भनेर एउटा चाहिँ 5औं नम्बरको रोयल्टीमा हामीले चाहिँ यसपल्ट हामी आयोगमा आएको 3 वर्ष भयो, तेस्रो वर्ष हो हुनाले रेडियो फ्रिक्वेन्सी पनि एउटा नेचुरल रिसोर्स हो भन्ने कुरा आइडेन्टिफाई गरेर सबै पालिकाहरूलाई, जबसम्म पालिकाहरू दह्रो हुँदैन तबसम्म हाम्रो फेडरलिजम दह्रो हुन सक्दैन। पालिकाहरूको आफ्नै ओन सोर्स रेभिन्यू चाहिँ दह्रो बनाउनु पर्छ भन्ने हिसाबले हामीले चाहिँ सरकारलाई हामीले रिकमेन्ड गरेका छौँ। तर त्यो इम्प्लिमेन्ट गर्ने चरणमा छ। सायद यो गाउँपालिका महासङ्घ, नगरपालिका सङ्घ लगायतका हामी सबै मिलेर त्यसलाई चाहिँ इम्प्लिमेन्ट गर्ने चाहिँ पक्षमा पुग्छौँ होला भन्ने मलाई विश्वास छ। यति भन्दै आज जुन सम्पूर्ण सहभागी साथीहरूले एक्टिभको साथ, सक्रियताको साथ सहभागी हुनुभयो र हाम्रो प्रेजेन्टरहरूले आफ्नो एकदम वोइसफुल प्रेजेन्टेसन गरिदिनु भएकोमा धन्यवाद दिँदै, आयोजक मित्रहरूले मलाई जुन चेयर गर्ने अवसर दिनुभएकोमा धन्यवाद दिँदै आजको यो सेसन यही समाप्त भएको घोषणा गर्छु। धन्यवाद।